Okay, hi, I'm Joe Glines, and welcome to this AutoHotkey webinar. We're going to be covering dealing with multiple files and breaking your files, your code into separate files and possibly pulling them back together. And I'm Joe Glines. I'm out of Dallas. I'm not a programmer. I have a passion for automating and saving time. My main tool is AutoHotkey that I use, but I have no background in programming. I've been learning more and more, and I can fake it pretty well, but I'm not a programmer. And my friend Jackie here, who's our co-host. Jackie, why don't you intro yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jackie, and mostly like Joe, I'm no programmer, but yeah, I just love actually being able to still dabble in a few things here and there. And some of my friends, they like calling me a coder, and of course I can do some stuff in AutoHotkey, and I'm glad and happy to be able to do it. And yeah, I'm just really I find it really rewarding to actually being able to automate different work tasks and stuff. Yeah, it really does give me a lot to.
You know, I actually, the other day, I should have told you, I got invited to go in tomorrow to some company and help with some automation. And,
Mhm.
and for the first time, I actually almost thought of myself as a developer instead of my background in statistics and research and stuff.
Nice.
It's been a far cry because I almost always decry myself like I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I've been getting better. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
yeah, I'm just happy that the people around me at work and stuff, they believe that I'm better than our IT department. So yeah, that's that's a great
Yeah,
feeling.
you know what I think the benefit is that's what I have too is I can think like a non-programmer, and so I see what people do, and I can think of ways and things that can be done to simplify life. Whereas programmers, they often just don't think that way, right? And so even though they have much better skills than I do at programming, they don't see the need and think of ways that actually you could, make tools to simplify your life.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So, all right, let's get cracking. So we had 72 people registered, and we tell people, right? It's great if you're here because you can do a Q&A, but you don't have to attend. We just like having it recorded so people can watch them later. But you can imagine if we didn't mute everybody, we would all be talking over each other, and of course hearing the dog in the background from Bob's computer, wherever Bob is, I don't know. But so we start off muted. You can raise your hands and you can post into the chat. And I see we got some from Brazil and Tennessee. Actually, I'd love if everyone right where you're from. I love seeing that stuff. But it is cool. And of course, the timing is hard because we want to have a time that works for the entire planet, which is virtually impossible. But so we
Always night somewhere.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So we start off muted, and then the first hour, Jackie and I will go through the deck we have. One of us, when one's talking, the other person's watching the chat to see if there's a question or whatnot. But so ask your questions there, or raise your hand if it's too complicated of a question. We can unmute you specifically, and you can verbally ask it. But for the most part, in the first hour, we'll just go through, and then at the end of the first hour, we're going to take a pause, and then we will open it up where everybody can just unmute yourself and ask whatever question. And in that second hour, the first hour would be great if you can keep your questions focused to our topic at hand. And then in the second hour, especially maybe the first 10 to 15 minutes, we'll do more Q&A on this topic. But after that, if you have things that you're trying to code and you're having problems with, we're happy to try and troubleshoot and do whatever as well.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get going. First thing we do is we start off, and today I actually, because they were so similar, we found two scripts that I wanted to highlight, and one is a dictionary search, and the other is like a thesaurus. And so let me come in here and launch both of them, get them running here. All right, so now they're both running, and this one, so what it is, you highlight a word, and now I hit Alt-D, and it'll pull up, I think it does, if I remember right, it's an API call to like Google's dictionary. I forget what the source is, but it'll pull up what you searched. And what's really cool, what it doesn't really look like in the tool, is I can double click on a word in here, and it will keep actively following what I'm doing. Right. So this is a cool dictionary tool. And then this one, which is basically RomSec, borrowed a lot from Fanatic Guru and wrote this one. And so if I hit Windows Alt D, it pulls up synonyms for the word that you have highlighted. And it also works in the same way. Yeah, I should have known there was no synonym for dictionary or whatever it was. Dictionarius, perfect. But anyway, these were pretty cool tools that you can, have at the tip of your fingers, right? And dynamically be able to query. And it looks like this one even has, I could type in a word here. Yeah, so he threw in an edit box here. I don't think that was in the dictionary.
No.
Huh, I hit the wrong hotkey. That's my device manager. Alt D, that's right. Yeah, I got too many hotkeys. Oh yeah, okay. So anyway, those were the two scripts. Well, I guess I should have also mentioned after later this evening or by tomorrow, I'll take everything we review, especially because sometimes people ask relevant questions that will say, oh, you know what, we could have included that in the deck. And I will upload that, and then we will email out a link to everything that we share. So you don't have to worry about asking for the links to stuff that are in here. If you're here, I believe you probably have registered, and then you'll get an email with the resources and recordings, links to recordings of the videos.
Yeah, apparently a lot of people actually catch it that way, which is great.
Yeah, it is. But that's the thing, is like, we know everyone's busy, right?
Yeah.
All right, so this is just a highlight overall of what we're going to talk about today. So we're dealing with multiple files. We're going to talk a little about using functions. This, by the way, we actually had a webinar talking about using custom and building your own functions. And so I just hyperlinked it in here. If you haven't seen that webinar and you're new to functions, it's a good source to start learning. And we're going to talk about using the include and library folders. And then we have 4 different methods for sharing variables or data or strings, whatever, between scripts. And then basically the overall concept of sometimes you want to reverse it and go from multiple down to one, and also why you should and why you might want to and might not want to do that. All right, so for this first one, and I stole a lot of this straight from the AutoHotkey help, right? It's basically dealing with libraries, and the what I should have had, which is down here, it really should have been the focus, right? Of like, why in the world would I use functions and use a library? Once you start using them, they're really great because you can have, the same function leveraged by multiple different scripts, and then that way, if you ever update your function, it gets applied everywhere. So that's one of the big reasons why I use my library. And I have a big library compared to a lot of people, because when we do stuff, I didn't realize I have a lot there. But it's really nice because it also, not only does it allow it easy to share between stuff, but it also means that the file I'm working in has a lot less stuff in it, and so I can focus on just what this script is about.
Yeah, sure thing. And yeah, you're good at actually doing that. And I also do it some, but again, a lot of the stuff that I write, which is not maybe that big, is for sharing. And to me, it has most of the time been easier to just include that in the actual script.
Right. And agreed. And actually, I wanted to demonstrate real quick. So before I get there, but my swapping over to using AutoHotkey Studio instead of Site has greatly changed that issue, Jackie, because I did that all the time. I would use my library, and then I would share my script, and people are like, it says it doesn't have this function. I'm like, I forgot to go find all my functions and pull them in. But before we go there, so I just wanted to walk through real quickly. So AutoHotkey and other programming languages do something similar to this as well, because I know Python, you would point to where your library functions are, right? And it would go look in there for the functions. And it starts off in this order, if I remember. Actually, its order's down here. but it'll look in, you know, where your first. Let me rephrase that. In your where your script is, it'll create. You can have a lib folder there, right, and it'll automatically look there. It also looks under your My Documents for a folder called AutoHotkey for lib, and will look there. And then this is the one I use. Wherever my main AutoHotkey script is running from, there's a lib folder there. And that's for me because I don't like having stuff under My Documents, because then on different computers, it's in different, the paths are different, and just keeping track of it all are tougher and keeping them synced. But this is the one I use, and I put them all there. The order searched is it starts off in the original. Of course, it looks in the original file, as Jackie was alluding to. Your function can be in your file, and then you can just lever. It's right there, and it calls it, and it's there. Then there's your local library, and that was this one, and then the user library, and then the standard library. Right, that's the order it searches. The other one I just wanted to point out, even though we're not diving deep into functions, but this was an interesting one of. If you can create like a library of functions by starting off with a name like this and then putting an underscore. So the actual library name would be ie.ahk, and in ie.ahk I could have ie underscore load, I could have ie underscore navigate, ie underscore get element, right, whatever, and the library would search this file each time. And why is that? Well, it's because it begins with this, and then it has an underscore. You got anything to add to that, Jackie?
Yeah, I do remember this being a big thing in the old form, the one that's archived now, where they would call a function being standard library ready or compatible. And that is exactly this. They reference to with the underscore, making it standard library ready.
I didn't know that. Thank you. So this is my Excel library that I've built. And so in it, I have all my Excel functions, right? So all my Excel functions are in one file. And I can actually, because this file, if you look up here, it's in that path I mentioned earlier, right? It's in my library. I don't even have to use an include, which I should have mentioned, right? Is you don't have to use an include, and it'll automatically go and grab them from there for me. Actually, this second one, because that's in here, you can have functions inside of it, and that's okay. But everything in here will start with XL underscore, and that's what gets me around having all these different include files. And then, so let me demonstrate something real quickly here with Studio. So I've switched over to Studio, and my speed of coding is really greatly increased in speed. So, but let's say we had a function, and we're gonna write a function called myfunc, and I'll say we have one parameter, and here this would just be, it'll be whatever, right? Message box. We're gonna make it whatever I pass to it, it's gonna do a message box of it. But let's say, you know what? Let me no, I don't think I even need to save this. I do. It'll make more sense here. Let me save it real quickly to my C drive. Yeah. Oh, apparently I have a test there. Okay. So now what typically in Sight I would do is I would say, oh, okay, let me write an include. And let me, actually, I should have first, I would cut this, create a new file, paste it in there, name it myfunc, and then here I would tell it to include myfunc, right?
Yeah.
But in Studio, what you can do is you can highlight your function, and then I got to look at, because I'm still learning it, Control-Shift-N. So Control-Shift-N, and it'll drop you into that same folder and say, it uses the name of the function to say, is this what you want to create? And I'll say, yes, I'll save it. And notice it actually removed it from here for me and then put my include for me, right?
Yeah.
So it does all that. And here's the beauty of, so it automatically did that for me. It dropped it in to my B drive. I mean, I believe you guys would trust me, it's there. But the other really cool thing is oh, it's the wrong one. I'm trying, Alt-T. So, oops. Sorry. Well, let me just go where? Oh, that was under B. All right, let me find it. I hit the wrong thing. So see the myfunc there?
Yeah.
So, and over here, I can see that this file has myfunc in it. And actually, I could jump right to it here, which is also really convenient, right? Is like, this will show me all my includes. And so here, it shows you what includes you have in them. But what's really cool is back in here is when I'm ready to share it, I can hit here and say publish. And when I do it, oh, that's interesting. Anyway, what it does is it packs up everything. Let me try the other one as maybe it was this one. No, I think there's something happened weird with that. But it will I'm not Chad will fix it. But it will automatically, let me see if it when it posted that, because that one will share it onto the, oh no, it didn't. Huh. Weird. But it automatically creates a version that has all the includes in it for you. Let me do that from like this one, because I think it's this one. Yeah, this one's I don't want to do that. Pre-webinar. Yeah, this one's fine. So I'm gonna share this one. It has an include. I'm gonna publish it. And now if that version, if I remember right, no, where?
It put it in your clipboard. That's at least what the toolbox says.
Oh, is that what it was? I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, he has a different one. I was confusing it. Thank you. So I'll open up Site here, and I'll just paste it. And so that brought in my includes. So this top part here, which wasn't in that other script, that's what this include default settings. If we actually open that file, you'll see that's what was there, right? Yeah. So it automatically brought that into this script. So when I share it on the forum or whatever, all of the stuff is already in it. And that's why for me, I'm like, holy cow, now I don't have to, I just have to remember to publish it, and I can export it and save it as a file too, and it would just save it locally. But yeah, it's really convenient, because the other great thing, which I believe he's done, is let's say like I had an Excel include in there. It doesn't include my entire Excel library. It includes the functions that are needed to actually, make the script work.
Yeah.
All right. So enough on that. But that, if you haven't, hopefully y'all using functions, because they are a game changer, honestly. And here's the biggest thing to me for a function, right? If you're writing Go subs, think of Go subs as very similar to a function, except for you can pass a parameter to it that will change, like inside that, you can use it, and that allows you to reuse code over and over, and often you'll want to change just slight little things about it, and that's what functions are. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, but that is one of the biggest things for me.
Yeah, I kind of like functions as well, also because it makes it easy to actually have a single thing returned. Whereas if you go to a Go sub and it changes, let's say, variable contents and stuff like that, it will do it in the global space, whereas in the function you'll control if you want it to happen in the global space or wherever you want it to happen. Yeah,
which is another thing we'll talk about later, of when you're bringing multiple files back together, and some of those things come up of like, now suddenly I had a lot of different variables in different scripts, but they were the same variable, but because they were in separate scripts, it didn't matter, and now they're in one, and like, oh man, we got problems. All right, so let's get into the fun stuff. The simplest one, and I grabbed the vast majority of this from the command helpline, the help file, is that you can pass parameters when you launch a script, right? So let me close that, and in here, my first example, I'm gonna start back up Studio and bring in. That's the wrong one. There it goes. All right, I'm gonna bring in these two to Studio. So here I have a clip for sending. Oh, command line parameter. I'm like, why did I name it clip? And this is the receiver, right? And so my sending, basically this is how you do it in your first code. And this the benefits of this overall, the biggest benefit is really simple. The biggest negative though is like it's one dimensional and it only works. You get it. You can start your other script and pass variables to it, but there's no back and forth and no checking on it later, right? It's a one-time slam dunk. You're done. In this one, I'm going to go ahead and run. I'm going to start this one so we can see it. But I've created a variable 1 and a variable 2. And here I've told it this is how the structure of how you do it. You tell it to run. You need this AutoHotkey exe, which to me, I'm like, why do I need that? Because I can just put this. Oh, sorry. I can just put this part. But for the parameters to work, I believe you have to have that in there. And this is how you pass it, which is weird. But because when there's a space in here, you need to wrap it in quotes, right? And then you can negate that kind of issue. And then the receiver, now I'm gonna run get this. Oh, actually, sorry. Yeah, I don't run it from here. My bad. Come on. So this receiver, how am I gonna do this? All right, hold on. Let me get this, and we'll have that, and come over here. Okay. And now I'm going to hit my hotkey. What? Oh, I changed the name. Oh, so my bad. I went through and was trying to be smart. So I need the name of this CLP_receiver. So in here, now we'll try it. Okay. So I had a bunch of the same files named receiver and sender and sending, and I was getting really confused. So I wanted to change each name so it was easier for me to keep track of. So anyway, let's go back to receiver. And now that message box is this very first one, right? And so right here, I'm doing a message box, and it's the first example. So that's the title here of first equals, that was the first equals hello, right? That's what we sent in the other script. And then second was goodbye, right? So we've passed that value through the command line to this script, and now I can see what's in this and what's in this. The second thing is if you do a message box on the 0, it will show you how many parameters have been passed. And so that's a way for you, especially here if you wanted to go in to do a loop over the parameters, right? You want to know how many were passed, unless you're always only passing 2 or 1. You don't have to do that. But it's a nice way to say, look, I can make this loop over however many are there. This next one was really odd to me. This is why I want to make sure I put in here was, to me, if you've played with AutoHotkey enough, you see message box, and this % would mean everything after this is function. Jackie, is that the right way to say that?
Expression.
Expression. Thank you. I knew that didn't sound right. So I would have thought normally this would work. However, it comes up with a 1, right? Even though here, normally I take a message box and I remove the double percents and I put 1 in front and it works. But in this case, it doesn't work like that. You have to either reference it this way, or in here, what you can do is if you want to save it, if you want to save what's in this one variable as a new variable, if you do it this way, it doesn't work. If you do it that way, it doesn't work. You have to do it where you just use an equal sign and still wrap these with the percents. And this way, now in the next message box, you'll see I transferred what was in each of these variables into param1 and param2, and now I'm displaying them here.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Just because I wasn't with you when you tested it, are you sure that the expression doesn't work?
Yeah, painfully.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, that was when I got on the call with Maestria too, because I'm like, I'm going insane, right? I'm like, it works down here, which is like, this same approach works down here, but it didn't work up here. And I'm like, what in the hell am I missing? And Maestria, he's like, I don't know why, but this works and the other way doesn't. And I'm like, okay, at least I know. But yeah, so down in here, right now we're at this message box, and then we're going to go into this loop. And so parameter number 1 is hello, right? That's what we're looking at here. So here's the A index in param. But notice we saved it here, right, with the colon equals and that, and then inside here in this loop, it works like that. Although, obviously, Jackie, this is where maybe you can explain it, right? Is normally when you use a colon equals, I wouldn't wrap this with the percents, and yet here,
but that's a double deref.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And so maybe up here, that's what it has something to do with. But trust me, I tried it a lot. But I'm
I'm not saying it because I haven't tested it. So if you
Yeah.
say it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Well, we can test it too. But we got a lot to cover, and we're only we're halfway through the first hour. So and like I said, I'll send out these scripts and everything. But this is how you can start the other script by passing it a variable's value from your script to the other one.
Yeah.
All right. Let me close these so I don't confuse myself. I'm going to close all these just to clear it up. That's close enough. Okay. And so here's the pros and cons. It's very simple and reliable. It's also easy once you get the hang of it. It's very easy for people to understand. But again, it only works when you're starting up the second script and you're passing strings and variables, and it's one direction. Mm-hmm. The next method is using an OnMessage. And by the way, so we have a webinar discussing using messages and I guess still messages is the best way to summarize it. So that's a link to that webinar.
Yeah.
And this one's simple to use. The code itself is a little complex, but the person doesn't have to understand it to use it, right? It's pretty easy to use. So let's have a quick example of that one. And so in this one here, here's the sender and receiver. And so the sender, here I told it which script to look for to send the message to, right? And thankfully, this one I did get updated, so it knew go target that one. And I'm going to pass hello world to that other script. I'm going to launch this first, but I have a hotkey, so it's not going to run yet. On the receiver end, this is the code to get it, right? So this is what you'd have at your top, and on message, and it's going to call this function. And in here, the tooltip is receive data. This is the variable that's going to store this received data. It's going to store it from what gets passed. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think this one's running yet, right? Let me launch this one. Now when I hit my hotkey, see my tooltip, and it says hello world, receive message hello world, and I can hit it again. I can keep, whenever I want, hit my hotkey and send from my original sender script. Actually, let's. So good enough. I'm gonna reload it, and now when I hit it, so now it's sent that's all, folks, to that second script, right? Again, we don't have to get into the how it's doing it, because that's a deep channel I don't want to go into right now. But it's pretty easy to use, right? Once you get the hang of it.
Yeah. The OnMessage part of it is built into AutoHotkey, of course. And then you're just using the Windows API in the correct way, and that's that. You'll need to copy the send VM copy data to your server or sender, and of course the other part to your receiver, and then use the values as you see fit. But right. Yeah, it should be fairly easy to actually set up and use.
Yeah, and I think especially, we could probably build a simple wrapper that would make it even easier for people to just say, here's all you need to basically to have the code in here, but this is what you want to store it in that variable.
Yeah, you could put the two functions in a file of itself and then include them, or put them in the standard library and use them. So yeah.
All right, this next one I thought was pretty cool until I learned of a new one, which we're going to cover after this one. But what this does is it creates a volatile key in your, well, actually in Windows. You can see it in your registry, which I'll show you here if you're interested. but it's using a COM object with the W script shell. And so I'm going to launch my sender, and I'm going to launch the receiver here. Oh, and so that was my bad. So the receiver, the benefit and negative of this too is they don't have to be running at the same time, right? I can use my sender and I can set variables, and actually until you reboot, they'll be available, or unless you destroy them and delete them. But your receiver can go check it because they're not stored in another script. They're stored in Windows memory, and so you can go get them whenever you want. And so right now, this went and looked up the item test and pulled back the value, which in that case I had sent to this is my test. But if I change that, so I'm going to save this. Now, if I didn't rerun it yet, if I reran my receiver, it's going to still say the same thing because I haven't updated the actual value in memory, right? If I come back here and now I set it, then in my receiver, now when I run this, it pulls in that other, it's been updated. And what's cool is I can create, many different, it works just as an object. I can create many different things. It doesn't have to be called, I should do that off of this one. It doesn't have to be called test, right? I can call them a bunch of things, different names, and create these variables in your registry, which let me show you because it is neat. And thankfully I bookmarked it because finding it can take a little bit. So if you look at your HKey current user and then you go down to volatile environment, see this test? And see now here it says another test. So if I went back into my original sender and said, last time, and I run it, actually, let me see if I can come down here. There we go. And now when I run it, oh, I thought it would have, let me see if I click off it and come back. Oh, so see, yeah, it updates, I think really, really fast. It's just my registry doesn't refresh and understand that. So that's why this one's kind of cool because I can do stuff in script A and script A can close, and yet I can have that value saved somewhere where I know exactly where to go get it.
Yeah, it's great as long as you don't overwrite whatever someone else actually did.
Right. Yeah. And you can pass. There is a character limitation, which I think I tested at some point, but you can get quite a bit. But again, you can create multiple keys and just save your stuff there. So that's one way you can do this stuff, which is I think pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. Also, because you don't actually need to have scripts running. So.
Right. Right.
So yeah. And again, you don't need to create your own any file or whatever. But again, yeah, it depends. Some likes some like doing it that way with somewhere built in that people don't see, and others like controlling it more and keeping it for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me if you'd agree with this without doing any testing, but I got to think because this is writing it to memory instead of like to a file, like any file, like you mentioned or whatever, it's probably on average going to be faster than anything with disk access, right?
I can't say, but yeah, it might be writing to the registry is probably pretty quick. But yeah, you could probably use write and read and do it in your own area instead of actually using the volatile environment. But here, it's Windows is cleaning up for you. So yeah.
By the way, a little sidetrack, but it was when I was looking at this code and realizing I'm just connecting to a COM object and doing this stuff. Mm-hmm. Again, for some reason in my head, I always thought of the registry as like a text file, which I know it's saved that way, but I always still thought of it as a text file, in that it's literally like with XML. In my head, XML. When I hear XML, it's always a text file, somewhere. And only from years of working with it now, I'm like, it doesn't have to be a text file. It's a structure, right? It can be an object that's live, and you can dynamically do stuff with it. I mean, granted, if you're going to save it, it'll be a file. But
you could your test thing here. You could do that the same with the built-in registry.
True.
The function that's built into AutoHotkey, you don't actually need to use the rescript shell to actually do this. It just gives it a nice look.
I'd be interested though. I mean, the one thing is it has the dot notation, which is why I'd like. I guess you're not nesting it though, so maybe that wouldn't be relevant. But I'm curious if one would be faster than the other, right? I could see.
Oh, yeah, but then I'd actually guess that the function would be faster, because most of that would be run by the compiled C++ code of AutoHotkey. So that would be my guess, that before actually creating the re shell and doing it with the environmental function there, actually just using AutoHotkey's built-in write function and just having the right path in the registry to actually write to, that's probably faster. But it's probably milliseconds in difference.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So this last one, actually, let me just go to here first. This is just to me the badass, like, holy cow! I didn't know this existed until the other day, and Maestria, he's like, well, this is the one I use, and that's what he uses in Studio too. But you basically create your own CLS ID, and you can go online and find that. That's a unique ID for your piece of software or whatever, right? And it's a really long string that Windows will know when I see the string, it's that program. Is that a good summary, Jackie, of what it is?
That's fair enough. You can also get an AutoHotkey function that will generate a new one for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
you don't actually need to register it for it to work.
No, right. Yeah. It's just, it has to know which we'll show here in the code, that one script says this is it, and the other one has to know what that is, and then the two can communicate back and forth, and it's really fast, and you can loop over the four loops. I should have highlighted that better. Don't have an enum to iterate over, but you can still loop over it in things like in arrays. But it's badass, and it's fast.
So it's the same with the normal. It's just AutoHotkey objects, and they don't have an enum either.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it simply doesn't work, because it's still just an AutoHotkey object. Yeah.
Oh, I thought I opened them. All right, hold on. All right, so here, this is my sender. And in here is my unique CSLID, CLSID. I don't know. And I'm going to create an object. I'm going to store it in X, right? And then, actually, in this one, I do have to have. If I tried running this right now, and it would have an error because there's no other script running that it can connect to. So in my receiver, this is where I'm like, good God, I didn't even look at this, because I'm like, it's over my head. I know if I studied it long enough, I'd figure it out, but I'm like, I just don't care, right? But let me launch it real quick. So I'm gonna launch it. I think I didn't launch the other one, but what we'll pay attention to is this part down in here. In this first one, see this example return? That's where in my sender, and let me make sure I launch it. See here, x dot example return, right? We're going to call that function inside the other script. And so when I hit my hotkey, it just showed the data. Wait a minute. Oh, look at this. I got 20 scripts running here, and they all use the same hotkey.
But yeah, you're still getting the correct information, because in example return, you're setting the variable information to help, and then you're returning that information. And what it's showing you is showing data pulled, example return. So that's help. Yeah.
So here's the help. Where did it go? Here we go. So information that we turn, and so that's what Jackie is mentioning right now, right? I first, inside the function, stored help in the variable information, and then I returned it. And this example return, this is the function I'm calling from the other script. And so I just did a message box on it. The other thing I did up here is, see it says custom sender, right? This is showing you what the script name is of what the message box is coming from. Because in the second one, this one down here, it actually shows the message box from the other script. And so this one, I'm pulling it back, and the next one, now see it says cust receiver, right? That now we're down here, and we passed this object. Let me grab this and go to here. So see x.obj, right? That's where right here. This first one is just test. The first parameter I passed was the word test, and that's why this message box here says test. And then when I hit OK, now it stepped into the next part of it, which was an array, the second parameter. Notice I passed it an array, the words 1, 2, and 3. And so in the second one, I looped over the second parameter. I was able to use the max index there. And so remember, I'm passing this from the other script, right? An array, and I'm accessing it with dot notation and looping over it and storing it and then putting it in a message box down here showing array total, which is, all of those things. Sorry, right here. 1, 2, 3, right? Tab delimited with those words. Hopefully that made sense. I know it's pretty complex. And what I'd say is, it made a lot more sense to me when I had the actual code and I started playing with it and dynamically changed one thing, and then okay, I'm getting it.
Yeah, I'd say that Lecticos, who first wrote this, his example also works quite well. Again, I think this example is quite good, Joe, and his is also quite interesting because he's in a way he's trying to show an example of multitasking or multi-threading using this, which is also usable for sure. And he has a server and a client, I think he calls his, whereas the server is the one that actually registers the object and holds the class, just like your receiver does. And then the client actually turns in, it changes a variable, and it sends in a job, and the job is then done by the client or by the server, and it then tells the client that the job is done. So yeah, both of them work quite well. And if you want to use this, which is, I use it myself also, and it works quite well. And it's, when you have set it up, it's, here you see it as a class, but you could just as easily use the way that you would use an object normally. You don't need to have the functions in a class per se. You could just use, classes are just a global object, but still it's just one way of showing how you can use this.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are put off by it being a class, and they are not using classes yet and stuff. And that just means that you don't actually need to use the way that we are showing it by using a class. You could use it with a much simpler object than what we are doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I was, my main part for this part, I wanted to show that you can, loop over the arrays, which was nice, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just the idea of actually passing information back and forth. If that's just what you wanted to do, you could use a very simple array-like object and just have it there. You don't need an actual class with its own functions to do the stuff. You could just simply use a normal object and say array, boom.
So Jackie, I was, like I said, I don't understand. I didn't even try it because it's just, it looks so crazy to me. I'm like, it's not worth my time to try to digest this. But my thought was, basically this string value up here, Windows will take that value and basically it it will know in memory where that thing is stored, right? And then the other script, that's what it tells it where to go look to go get the stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a fair enough way of putting it. Yeah,
Okay.
it will register this on the COM registry. I can't remember what that's called right now, but yeah, it will just register this. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And then that's how they basically both know where to go look, and that's why they can communicate, right? And
Yeah,
store things and set things.
yeah.
Do you want to because before we started, you were chatting, and maybe you can give it less specific an example, but the example you were talking about how you're using it now in your tool to save at the time of, because I think you were talking about with the screens and they would all be hitting it at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. The way I'm using it currently is that I have set up, instead of having one main script that keeps grabbing different parts of the screen, and to do that you use, let's say, an image search, and each time I had the main script do another image search on the screen, and I needed these image searches to happen very rapidly within a very short amount of time. And I wanted to kind of pull that load out of the main script so I could do different stuff. And the idea was to find some fast way of actually sharing the image of the screen between the scripts. And I ended up using this. It turned out I didn't need to have as many as I thought, but still I can now register an object, have that one script grab the screen information, get whatever I need from that, and then just update the object when there's new information. And the main script can just keep on going without stopping to actually grab screen data, because it can simply just ask the object for the current value. So that's really, really useful. Saves a lot of resources on the main script.
Oh, I forgot. I was remembering that was the last type of sharing we have, but we have one more slide. The whole consolidating down from multiple down to one.
Mm-hmm.
And here's one, man, if you're new to AutoHotkey and have realized like you can have multiple scripts running at a time or one single one, understanding that auto exec section even exists, because it doesn't often come up a lot. You can definitely not know about it for a while. But basically, the very top of your script, until you hit your first either return, exit, hotkey, or hot string type label, everything above that is the auto exec section until you hit that very first one. And so that's why, let's say in your normal script, you had two separate scripts running perfectly fine. You bring them together, and now suddenly one of them doesn't work right. Well, that's because you just stacked them, and you need to realize there is an auto exec section that some from the second one you need to move up into that auto exec section for it to work properly.
Yeah.
So hotkeys and hot strings, interesting enough, behave a little differently when you're going from multiples to one. Hotkeys will be conflicting. And so I can have Control D in one script and Control D in another script and run them, and there's no issues. But when I bring those both into one, it says you can't have, because it wouldn't know what to do, or it actually doesn't, it would just say the errors. And so, but of course, one thing you can do if you want is make them context sensitive, right? And say, hey, when I'm in PowerPoint, I hit Control D, run this part of it. When I'm in Outlook and hit Control D, run the other one, right? And so that way you still have the same hotkey. It's just you've curtailed it to the reference of knowing what program they're in when you do it. The hot strings, that's the other one that's like, wait a minute here. So hotkeys will error on multiples of the same one, but you can have the same hot string multiple times and there is no error. It will just use the very first one, and then that was the one that will get applied no matter what you type. And then another one is, when you the issues you'll come up to is in both scripts, you could have like temp, equals something. You could have a temp variable. That's a bad example. Sorry. a variable named dog in both scripts. But when you bring those in, they were different things in the different scripts, but now you're mixing and matching, right? And actually, Jackie alluded to it earlier. When you're dealing with functions, inside the scope of that function, they're all local variables, and you don't have to worry about it. And so that's a great thing about functions, as long as that's what you want, because sometimes it's really annoying when you first start learning functions and you don't realize that the things in there are local and the things outside of it are global. That gets confusing. But it really can help you streamline and not have to keep track of all the different names of things that you've put in there.
Yeah, for sure. One thing is, if you use GoSops and all of those different ways of keeping it all within the global space. But when you start doing what we showed here, where you might use includes or the standard library or whatever you use for that, it simply just removes a lot of headache if you use functions and if you keep whatever the function is local. So then the function can do whatever it wants with whatever it is passed and return a single thing. And by doing it that way, you make sure that that function can be used in whatever you might have in the future. It will never, it most likely will not conflict with anything in the foreseeable future, at least. So yeah, for sure. Local scope on the variables is most likely a good idea.
Like I said, I totally agree with that. It's just when you first start playing with functions, it can be very confusing of like, wait a minute, it's right there. And, or you're trying to access something outside and it can get a little confusing.
Yeah, and it can also be kind of a headache in trying to pass in, let's say, a lot of different parameters and only having the option of returning a single result can also be kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. Not the caveat, but I was going to say was, now that I've gotten more familiar with playing with objects, that's where I'm like, crap, I'll throw it all into an object and pass the object to my function, and then I have everything. And returning it's the same way, right? I'm like, it's a game. Yeah. It's so much easier, and I can use dot notation and just like, man, it's awesome.
Yeah.
This is pretty obvious. Of like, look, when you are merging two files together, you're probably merging them together for a reason, right? And the reason is that maybe they're similar. They accomplish some of the same goals. Well, if that's the case, maybe some of the code in them you actually have more than once, and maybe you should do your due diligence to trim it down and just have it, streamline the code and not have it multiple times, because troubleshooting it or cleaning it up later could be a pain.
Yeah.
And then, so let's talk about some of the benefits of having multiple scripts versus one script. So multiple scripts. The big reason why for me people laugh. Let me show you here. If I go up to Task Manager, and you'll see how many AutoHotkey scripts I have running. So I have, there's two that were from our test, right? But the rest, all of these are normally running on my computer, right? And people often see that like, why in the world you can move them all into one? I said, yeah, I know, but here's the thing. Like my screen clipping script, like this one, right, where I can grab stuff. That's one people go, hey, I like that. Can you give me a copy of that? And originally I had that in my main script, and I would have to go find these different parts of that script, and each time pull them out and then put them in one and give them to them. And then it was just like, and then someone again later would ask for, I might make a tweak to some of the code, so I'd have to redo it again and again. And so I finally realized, you know what? Because I have, I'd say like 4 or 5 that are just, they're easier to keep them isolated. They theoretically, I don't think they really take up any more memory running that way. Do they, Jackie? Maybe a little?
Yeah, they of course, they load an instance of the AutoHotkey exit each time you have a different script. So you could talk about, let's say, having 100 of those would actually add a few hundred megabytes or whatever extra on your computer. So,
but it's in today's world, it's just negligible, right? It's not an argument because
You
I
you
mean, one
you
is
need to have way too many running.
yeah. Um, and then also troubleshooting when they're totally separate. You know, when you actually go to figure out what's going on, and it's easier to isolate exactly, is it this script that something's going on versus it's all in one, and you might have other things affecting it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
sure.
versus why you might have in one file is, hey, I have one file, right, and I can go edit that one file, and it's all together, and I don't have to go find the different scripts. The I know there's also a script that takes care of it, but having one script in the system tray, you can, of course, in the multiple scripts, you can use the no tray icon, which is what I do on a lot of mine, so they're not even
Yeah,
visible here.
yeah.
But there is another script I saw, I should have linked to it, that even if you don't do that, it can consolidate all of the AutoHotkey icons into one. But,
Mm-hmm.
so that isn't necessarily an overall main benefit, but it is. I don't like having a ton in my system tray.
No.
And then also sharing code, you have one file, right? And actually, the sharing code, that was, again, a lot of my stuff has a lot of the same needs, and so putting those into one file, I don't have to have repeated code unless I break them out into an include command, right? That's the way I would do that. But that way
Yeah,
I can keep.
but that's again, the one script might make more sense the newer you are to doing this, because if you're using Go subs and stuff like that, one file might seem way easier. But when you get the grasp of functions, and when you start maybe using includes or using the standard library and stuff like that, it gets less important to actually have the same all of the stuff in that one file to edit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and which I demonstrated, but that was also with Studio. I love was I can, if that file has an include, which of course none that I have open right now do, but I can jump right to it. And because before in Sight, I would have to go open that file, and it was just, oh, there's more time, I have to go find that file. I've seen some code that you could highlight the name of the file and hit a button, and it would pop it open for you, which can definitely help. But it's one of those things like, is it really easier? Does it save me time? It just depends on where you are, and part of it's your preference and what you're working on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, right at 4, I'm gonna stop. All right. So bear with me here. I'm gonna stop the recording.